Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I want to discuss the Jupiter transit through Scorpio, which begins on the 10th of October and finishes on the 8th of November next year, and outline the general themes it will then cover and potential lessons we need to learn, and also put it into context. Now, Jupiter in Scorpio is the continuation of Jupiter in Libra. It's the next step of consciousness, and it's the one that we also have to transit in order to get the best out of Jupiter in Sagittarius, which is Jupiter's natural sign. So before I go through Jupiter in Scorpio, I want to outline or review what we've been experiencing in Jupiter in Libra. Now, ideally with Jupiter in Libra, what would have been learning to do is the wisdom of balance. So this is bringing the light side of ourselves into balance with the shadow side. So whenever we see our shadow side reflected back to us of other people, rather than engaging in projection, we would ideally learn to acknowledge where that person is reflecting back to us an element of our shadow side. So, because everyone around us mirrors back to us qualities of ourselves. Some people inspire us because they radiate the positive qualities of ourselves that we haven't cultivated yet. Other people elicit a gut reaction of dislike because they reflect back to us parts of ourselves that we've rejected in some way. So for the past 13 months, ideally what we should have been doing is whenever we've had a reaction in any kind of circumstance where we've met another person, to pause for a moment and ask, what is this person reflecting back to us, and what can we learn from it, and how do we accept this part of ourselves? So Libra, you've got the light, which is a bit we consciously recognise and accept, and the shadow side, which is all the stuff that we've rejected or refused to acknowledge about ourselves. And in Libra, the task that Jupiter's been setting us is the wisdom of bringing these two together into balance so that we make peace with our shadow rather than projecting it onto other people. Now, if we look around us, we may know people who've done the proper work, so they generally have a peaceful vibe, they're at peace with themselves rather than clashing with others. If we look at the world around us, we've seen a lot of the shadow side of Libra, which is the projection. So people reflecting back to each other the sides they don't like, but rather than questioning for a moment what this person is teaching us, just with the ego dismissed as part of that person and refused to look at themselves to see where the ego is being reflected back to us and where we need to make peace with that side of us so it's no longer controlling us, no longer sabotaging our actions and sabotaging where we are. Now, if from here, Jupiter's passage into Scorpio takes it the next step further. Scorpio has a tendency to polarize things. So if things are already heavily polarized, we're rejecting sides of ourselves, this sense of polarity will feel even stronger. But if we've done the work of Libra and we're conscious of the shadow side, what Jupiter in Scorpio gives us is the wisdom of alchemy. So this is transforming our own shadow. So Jupiter kind of Pluto, which is the ruler of Scorpio, gives this idea of polarization. So with Jupiter passing through Pluto's sign, which is Scorpio, we may find ourselves being polarized in certain extents where we're seeing both the positive and negative poles of a certain aspect of ourselves. And this polarization is necessary for us to recognize the psychic debris where we're holding on to stuff from the past. Scorpio, more than any other sign, has the power to transmute the deepest parts of ourselves, to take that journey inwards. And ideally, what we need to do during this time is take that inward path and look at ourselves, look at the depths of our consciousness, look into the deepest, darkest parts of our psyche, and shed a light there, acknowledge that side of ourselves and realise that it's no longer valid. Because all the old conditioning is tied to the past or projections of the future. Scorpio, at its best, is learning to be in the present moment, to realise that past and future are both, we can't do anything about the past, and the future is just a projection of the mind. It doesn't become real unless we focus on the present moment. And in the present moment, that is also where the ego's power diminishes immediately, because the ego is based on our past experiences and it also projects expectations into the future. But in the present moment, that's where everything truly happens. And when we're in the present moment, the ego loses all power. So during this time, one of the main things we need to learn to do is be present in our lives. Rather than living in the past, dwelling on resentments or anything like that, we need to use the power of forgiveness, which is one of the tools of Scorpio, to transform these old attachments to the past and become anchored in the present moment. Because Scorpio, more than any other sign, can delve deep into the psychological dross that we hold on to, all the old attachments that our ego maintains, because for whatever reason we built it into our sense of identity, but it's not truly who we are. We are not our pasts. The pasts have helped to form us, but what happened in the past has happened in the past to get us to where we are now. Now we need to move on from it, let go of it, and transform our relationship to the past, so our identity is no longer tied to what's happened to us or how we feel about things. It's based on who we truly are. Scorpio also gets us in touch with that core primal energy at the heart of who we are. It's an energy that we cannot describe with words, but when we break through those subconscious attachments and let go of our past, we feel that presence very powerfully, and we feel this, what some people may refer to as the mysteries of God. But we have to go through that phoenix transformation first by looking at our own subconscious attachments, looking at emotional triggers or emotional patterns within us that are based on old things in the past that may have been valid at the time, but they're no longer relevant to where we are now. What happened in the past is no longer who we are, but the emotional residue may still be there. Jupiter in Scorpio is all about expanding this awareness. Jupiter expands whatever he touches. In Scorpio, you may feel an intense rushing up of these old emotional triggers, these old emotional wounds. But what we need to recognise is these emotional wounds are not who we are. They're just a part of our past, and we need to let go of them. So when these emotions are coming up, when the old memories are happening, we need to take a breath and focus on the conscious moment or the present moment, and remember that what's happened in the past is no longer who we are. We don't need to be carrying this baggage with us into the future. We can let it go. And this is the power of forgiveness. Forgiveness often gets a bad rap. People have all these misperceptions of it, like if we forgive someone, we're condoning what the other person's doing. If we forgive something, it's a sign of weakness. Well, it isn't. Forgiveness is an act of self-love. It's something that we do for ourselves, and it breaks the tie of power to another person. Jupiter and Scorpio may also help to highlight our relationship with power and how we define it. Now, what we see in the world around us is a lot of people defining power by how we can control our external circumstances and how much we control other people. But this form of power is actually based in powerlessness. It's the belief that we're powerless unless we can control everything around us. But if we're in touch with our true power, which is inside us and has always been there, it can't be taken away, because at the core of our being, which no one else can get to. If we define power as an internal energy, the inner cosmic force that flows through all of us and comes from the realm of the soul, then the power plays that we may engage in at the moment are no longer relevant. We don't need to engage with them because we don't have to control other people to feel powerful. We recognise that the true power flows from within us, especially if we can learn to have that conscious connection with the divine. Call it God, Holy Spirit, universal energy, call it what you will, it's the same thing. If we can get rid of all the emotional attachments, all the emotional wounding that stand between us and our core, because these are all veils of illusion which Scorpio strips away, if we can engage in this rather than projecting our issues or trying to control other people out of fear of being controlled ourselves, then we can get in touch with a very powerful energy at the core of our being. And this energy only works for us when we're doing things with love. So this energy cannot be used to control other people. We will just be cut off from it if we try and doing that. But if we have the courage to face our own egos, to face our own shadow, and let go of what we've been holding on to, we can connect with this power and feel an immense love for ourselves. And this naturally builds and builds until it flows out into the world around us, and we become beacons of that light, that love, that flows out and transforms everything around us, and doesn't require us to take direct intervention with people. Just the fact that we've liberated ourselves from old conditioning can then help us to be a calming presence that helps other people to waken up if they're ready to do it. But it's not something we should ever try to force on other people. They have to make that choice themselves. We have the power, if we take that inward journey through Scorpio, to let go of our past and become a beacon of light that helps other people. Now, one thing to add to this is Jupiter goes through the signs every 12 years, so it might be worth looking back 12 years to around about October 2005 to November 2006, when Jupiter last passed through Scorpio, because we may well find that past events tied to this transit get reflected in this one to help us see where stuff hasn't been let go of from the past, but we may now be ready to do so. Because if we can engage in the Phoenix fires of Scorpio, of facing all the egotistic dross that we may have within us, the emotional attachments, emotional wounds, need to control other people, issues like jealousy, these all stem from fear and insecurity. But if we can have the courage to love ourselves enough to face these issues and recognise where we no longer need them, we can achieve much greater. We can achieve true freedom, where external events around us no longer dictate how we feel, no longer dictate who we think we are. We're freed from our past. We're free from all the baggage that we've been carrying with us, and we now have the option to set the direction that we want to go in our lives, free from old conditioning that stops us from taking those decisions. Because when Jupiter moves into Sagittarius, Sagittarius is the firing of the cosmic arrow of meaning. It fires it up into the heavens, ideally, but if we don't do the work of Scorpio, we can't pull the bowstring back far enough to launch the arrow of destiny far enough. Ideally, we'd want to launch it into heavens to understand our cosmic nature, but if we don't do the work of Scorpio, we'll just end up firing into the world and end up manifesting the shadow of Jupiter, which instead of being the benevolent ruler, is the greedy fat man, where everything is about ego bolstering rather than wisdom, understanding and beneficence. So I hope this is a useful guide for Jupiter and Scorpio. It may bring you much self-understanding, much wisdom and freedom from the past that you may be holding on to at the moment but are actually ready to let go of. Take care, and may this bring many blessings for you.